Welcome everybody to the First District Community Meeting. Today is March 10th. First of all, foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us this evening. Let me just make sure my camera was on. That's what I was checking. I know that right now it's been very interesting. We've had some interesting times, to say the least. I have to tip my hat to all of our teachers out there. Because right now I'm at home with a 6-year-old, doing online learning, and I have to say that I respect all of our teachers and all the work that they have to do, and I understand how hard that job is. And also to all those family members who have been affected by COVID, I want to let you know that I'm here with you. If you have a lost one that is lost, a loved one that has been lost, or if you have a friend that has succumbed to COVID, or if you have gotten COVID, or just COVID in general, as you at home and just feeling not in the best spirits, I want you to know that I am personally here with you and I'm here for you. If there's any way you could give me a call, feel free to give us a call. My phone number is area code 626-744-4444. I just want you to know that I'm here for you as a friend. Not just as your city council member, but more so as a friend and as a human. I love each and every one of you. I want you to know that tonight's meeting is a little different. So we're having a webinar style, and Q&A feature is available for questions. So you tap the link at the top of your Zoom page. There should be a area that says you can type in a question. Those questions, or at least some of those questions, should be answered tonight, depending on our time. If you don't have a question tonight, but you have a question that you want to talk about, feel free to email our office at cbell@cityofpasadena.net. Next slide, please. Hopefully you guys were able to see that. Could you go back to the slide? Maybe we should wait 10 seconds just so that you can write that address down, just don't have it. Once again, the phone number is area code 626-744-4444. That's 626-744-4444. It's basically 7 and 4 until it rings. Next slide, please. Always, anyone who is, I always try to engage and want our neighbors to be engaged with one another. It is so important that you know your neighbors and you get out, knock on their door, say hello. It's extremely important. I see people I'm an avid runner, so I always see our neighbors on our runs or even at the market, and I appreciate each and every person that has come up to me and said, "Hey, you're Tyrone, right?" I want you to know that I'm very grateful to each and every one of you for saying hello. And I always try to say hello on my runs, especially if I see all of our neighbors, our First District neighbors. But it's important that you do the same thing. So we have some First District neighborhood activities that are outside of our office, but things that our neighbors believe are very important to them in their neighborhood, and we feel the same exact way. So I just wanted to mention to you that there is an historic pillar repair at Prospect Boulevard in Orange Grove, and our neighborhood association, the East Arroyo Neighborhood Association, is putting that work together. And if you want to contact the East Arroyo Neighborhood Association or get involved, please email info@eastarroyo.org. The email is there on the slide as well. There's also, we have a lot of work going on in Hahamunga. I think a lot of people have seen all the trucks going in and out of the Hahamunga. If you've gone on any of our beautiful hikes throughout our city, Hahamunga is one of those areas that is, I mean, for me, it's the most picturesque. We go down there, me and my daughter and my wife, we take pictures down there regularly. We love Hahamunga, and I know that there are community members that want to be involved and try to figure out how to get involved. And so there's the Hahamunga Accountability Project. And on Thursday, March 11th at 5:30 p.m., they will be having a meeting. You can contact them at info.health@gmail.com. That is also on this slide. Also, we have another neighborhood meeting that is going to be coming up, talking about transportation and other neighborhood concerns. put on by one of our great neighbors in their neighborhood association. It's the North Raymond Avenue group. And on Tuesday, March 16th, they will be holding a meeting at 6:30 p.m. And you can contact Stephen LaPera at sclipira.gmail.com for more information for those meetings. Want to make sure that you all get involved, and so we'll leave this slide up for 10 more seconds. And also, if there's anything that you have a concern or need, we're always here. And we gave you the email in the last slide, which is cbell@cityofpasadena.net. And Kushan is on the line with us tonight. Next slide, please. Throughout our city and throughout the county and our region, pretty much the state, crime has been up. And so a lot of people have been wondering what is going on. And they want to know what's going on in our city as a whole. I would like to start off by saying that in our district, we are still the lowest crime area to live in the city of Pasadena. So I think you should applaud yourself for that, because all of our neighbors are looking out for one another. And it's so important that you see something that you say something. And so Wednesday, March 17th at 4:30 p.m. at our Public Safety Committee meeting for the city of Pasadena, there will be an update about what the city is doing as it relates to crime activity. And that will be held at 4:30 p.m. And that's just our regular public safety meeting. You can go to the City of Pasadena's website to access information, or if you need any more information about how to access that meeting, feel free to email our office once again at cbell@pasadena.net. Also, I want to let you know that we are getting so close, and we have a deadline of March 15th for anyone who is willing to apply to be on the Community Police Oversight Commission. It is a commission that is going to do some fantastic work, and I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to apply, get heard, be interviewed by some of our neighborhood associations and community groups for that pick to be on our our Community Police Oversight Commission. Thank you again. At this time, next slide, please. At this time, we are going to go into the main event. The main event is the Lincoln Avenue Specific Plan. The reason why we brought up the specific plan and the reason why we're having this meeting is a lot of the times people ask about the Lincoln Avenue Specific Plan and what is the city actually going to do? Well, today is going to explain to you exactly what specific plan is. It's not necessarily the city's plan, it is actually the people's plan. And when property owners make significant changes to their buildings or structures, the things that they have to do to benefit you, the resident, the neighbor, and also to make sure that your voice, your eyes, your ears are all a part of this plan, because this is your plan. People will say, you know, I've heard from those that have said, well, I thought we just had a Lincoln Avenue specific plan, and we're updating all of our specific plans, but it's important to me that everybody's voice is being heard during the time of the update for the specific plan, because the last plan was a good plan, but this plan is going to be a great plan because of the input that we are getting from the community. So with that being said, I want to introduce Anita Serta from the Planning Commission. She's not Planning Commission. She is with our Pasadena City Planning Department, and her department and her team is spearheading the charge for updating all of our specific plans. I think that everybody can see the same Zoom screens that I'm looking at here. And Anita, take it from here. You could introduce your team, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Hampton. Again, my name is Anita Serna. I'm with the city's planning department, leading the efforts on the Our Pasadena, which is a specific plan update program. Susan, next slide, and maybe we can start sharing screens here. Thank you. Okay. So for tonight's agenda, I'll introduce the program, provide an overview of the general plan goals for the Lincoln Avenue specific plan, highlight the city's outreach efforts and community feedback we received so far. And then I'll walk you through the refined vision for the Lincoln Avenue specific plan. And then I'll hand it over to Susan Ambrosini from AECOM. She'll walk us through key changes to the Lincoln Avenue specific plan. And then I'll conclude the presentation with next steps and open it up for questions from the community. Next slide, please. So introductions, I want to introduce quickly the team. So the Art Pasadena team is made up of city staff and our consultant AECOM. On the top left corner here, on the city side, we have David Sanchez, who's the principal overseeing the specific plan updated program. We have Martin Potter, lead planner, and Stephen Councimaro, who's a planning assistant. And then on the consultant side, we have Susan Ambrosini, the project manager, and Mike Peterson and Ari Cohen, both planners leading the efforts here on the Lincoln Avenue specific plan. Next slide, please. So I see a lot of familiar names on the login. And so for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Our Pasadena is a city program that was launched in 2018 with the primary goal of updating all 8 of the city specific plans in order to align it with the general plan land use goals and policies that were adopted back in 2015 after a very extensive outreach process that was conducted over a 6-year period. And so the program's timeline is a 3-year work effort. The first community workshop was held in 2018. The focus of the first workshop was to solicit feedback on the general vision for Lincoln and kind of talk about desired uses for the area. The second workshop was held in 2019 with the focus of soliciting input on draft vision, some key concepts for the area, and discussion on general building density and heights based on feedback that we received from the first round. And so last year, for the third round, we had to have it virtually because of COVID. And so what we tried to do was kind of simulate an in-person workshop or an open house. And so if you haven't checked out our Pasadena virtual rooms, I highly encourage you to do so. And so the goal of last year for the round 3 was to solicit input on refined uses of land, and we wanted to get feedback from the community on some key draft development and design standards. And so this year we hope to get to Planning Commission and hold a public study session where we'll be sharing a complete Lincoln Avenue specific plan for public feedback. And our goal is to have that study session in late April. Next slide, Susan. And so I often get the question of what is a specific plan? And so a specific plan is a document or a tool that many cities use, including the city of Pasadena, to implement these general policies that are in the general plan. So for example, there's a goal of making things more like aesthetically pleasing in terms of the building. And so the specific plan would include a set of development regulations that try to address the aesthetic or the massing of buildings. And so these regulations that you see in specific plan documents will apply to future development. And so as projects come in through the city, these new regulations would apply. Next slide. And so a specific plan is not a requirement to redevelop any private property or force any existing property owner to make changes. The plan vision will be realized over time as new private development is built. However, the plan also includes very important goals and policies that serve as a guide, not only for decision makers, but also for city departments when they're doing public improvements or they're seeking grant opportunities to provide some of those public benefits or public amenities we all want to see. Next slide. So in terms of the general plan for the Lincoln Avenue, so here's a map of the Lincoln Avenue specific plan area. And it's generally, it runs along Lincoln Avenue north-south and is bounded by Montana to the north and Hammond to the south. And that's the area you see on the map that's in gray. As part of the specific plan update, we are recommending some boundary changes. And so the areas kind of in the dashed orange lines, those we're recommending removing them from the specific plan area. And the reason is because they're single family residential uses that don't, that are typically not regulated through a specific plan document. And so the regulations just fall back to the municipal code. So there's no real reason to include them in the specific plan. And so here you just see a couple of snapshots of the Lincoln Avenue area. Next slide, Susan. So in terms of the general plan goals, the general vision for the Lincoln Avenue specific plan is to repurpose the Lincoln Avenue corridor from an industrial and limited commercial area into a more vibrant, economically thriving, well-designed neighborhood that's oriented with new housing options and a list of complementary local serving retail and businesses, offices, community uses, all tied together with public improvements that creates a vibrant and an enjoyable pedestrian environment. So that is kind of the general vision for Lincoln. Next slide, please. So in terms of community outreach, next slide. In addition to the 2 in-person community workshops that were held back in 2018 and 2019, we actually had a walking tour. It ended up being a virtual walking tour because it got rained out. We got great participation, a lot of feedback, so it was really successful. Also in 2019, we hosted a youth summit, and where we encouraged the Pasadena youth to let us know what they think about the specific plan areas, including Lincoln, and share their experiences with us. And so again, last year we had the 3rd round. It was virtual because of COVID. And so next slide, Susan, please. So in terms of the feedback that we received, it's been pretty consistent since day one, which is great because that means we're kind of heading in the right direction with this new specific plan. What we've heard so far is that many have expressed a desire to maintain a lower density character with 2 to 3 story height limits. We've also heard support for new housing opportunities, more affordable family-sized homes, for example. A desire to help mom and pop shops and local retailers has been expressed. We've also heard support for clean industries that are well designed and provide landscape setbacks and street trees. Many have also expressed a desire for a nicer pedestrian experience in and around the community, with more places within walking distance, more landscaped areas and shade trees. And lastly, we've heard a continuation of prohibiting liquor stores and alcohol sales has been consistently expressed by some. Next slide, Susan. And so the draft vision here. So when we went out to when we had the first community workshop back in 2018, we were talking about the vision, a desired vision for the Lincoln Avenue specific plan. And so each time we've gone to the community, we've kind of further refined that vision. And so what you see here today are 6 key concepts that together make up the vision. So it's a combination of the general vision, the existing 2013 Lincoln Avenue specific plan. We took some of those vision statements and also the feedback. And so this is what you see today. It's a combination of all those comments. And so the top left-hand corner here, the neighborhood character, it speaks to the desire of new development that is compatible and adds to the rich cultural history of the community. The next point, commercial core, really speaks to creating a strong Lincoln corridor with retail and services that are supported by reuse of existing buildings and some targeted infill development. The next point over housing choices, let's see here, the major point for that is to really try to encourage a variety of new housing options that complement the existing neighborhoods. The bottom left topic here on connected neighborhoods, it's really the idea of trying to create a more pedestrian comfortable experience, that it's safe and creates a sense of place with wider sidewalks and shade trees. And so that kind of spills over to the green and open space vision statement of a more livable and enjoyable, sustainable community with landscaping. And we all know with COVID, the importance of having open space. And so the last point here with Innovation Hub, the idea of having so continuing to support clean industrial and commercial uses that provide future-friendly employment and job opportunities. Next slide, Susan. And so, again, the vision statement is, we're using it as a guide, as a framework for how we approach the changes to the current Lincoln Avenue specific plan. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Susan Ambrosini from AECOM. She'll be walking us through the key changes to the Lincoln Avenue specific plan.
Great, thank you, Anita. As Councilmember Hampton and Anita mentioned, the Lincoln Avenue specific plan, the existing one hasn't been around for that long. It is relatively new, which is great. There's a lot in there that's really good. So we didn't need to start from scratch. We really wanted to leverage the good ideas that already exist in the existing specific plan, but infuse some of that new vision and guidance from the general plan in a more robust community process that's happened over the last couple of years. So what I'm going to do is highlight what are some of the key changes from the existing plan to the new plan, and then we'll have a Q&A. And if you've got questions about the specific standards, or questions in general, we're happy to dive in whatever level of detail you'd like. So in terms of housing and density, so thinking in particularly about residential uses and housing. So the feedback that we've gotten is the need for more housing of all kinds, including family-sized units and affordable housing, encouraging housing south of the 210 on the west side of Lincoln in the area that's circled here on the map, but to allow commercial on the ground floor if desired. Right now, it's more of a commercial-oriented area, so allowing more residential, but if you want to do commercial on the ground floor, that's okay too. And we've heard that townhomes or low to medium scale multifamily buildings are what would be appropriate scale for this area. So in terms of densities, so right now this area in the sort of light orange here and here are both multifamily areas, so no commercial is permitted here. The density right now is 16 dwelling units per acre. That would remain the same. So this density is just a calculation to understand about how many units you would be able to allow on a lot. So in this area here, shown in the circle, we would be allowing 48 DUs per acre in this zone. So right now the general plan allows up to 87 DUs per acre as adopted in 2015. But we felt it was appropriate to scale it down a little bit to still allow and encourage multifamily housing, but a scale that felt appropriate to the single family neighborhood to the west and just compatible with the overall scale of the Lincoln Corridor and the vision that we heard from the community. So in this new mixed use zone, it's this area shown in brown. It's called a mixed use zone, and the reason why is you're allowed to do either residential. You can do commercial as well, but it's important to know that you cannot do commercial on upper floors. So the idea is you wouldn't have like a multi-story office building here. You could continue with the commercial type uses that are there today, or retail type of use and neighborhood services type of use. But if you wanted to do a multi-story project, it would be residential on the upper floors. In terms of the height is staying almost the same. We increased it from 36 to 39 feet in the proposed plan. And the reason why we did this is there's been a trend towards larger floor heights in residential buildings. And then also on the ground floor, we are requiring a 15-foot ground floor for commercial because it achieves better design and flexibility in terms of uses. And so in order to have that commercial ground floor and 2 residential floors above at 12 feet, it gets you to the 39 feet. So moving on to the commercial core area, And by commercial core, we're referring to the area north of Muir High School that is a commercial only zone. And so the feedback has been to maintain the existing scale, create a pedestrian friendly atmosphere on the ground floor, provide adequate parking without requiring too much, and to help new local businesses open and to reduce the vacancies that we've seen sometimes in this area. So in terms of our approach, we're not proposing a change in height. So the height maximum would remain 36 feet. What we've chosen to focus on is really simplifying parking requirements to ease changes of use. And we think this is important, particularly as things are sort of shaking out post-COVID with demand for retail and other kinds of commercial uses. Right now, what happens sometimes is if you're trying to switch, say, from a retail use to a restaurant, because restaurants require more parking per square foot, often business owners cannot open because they're older buildings and they don't have existing parking lots that can be expanded. And so it prevents new uses from coming in and can contribute to vacancy. And so what we're proposing and it's actually a trend that you're seeing nationally even, is to try to simplify the uses or simplify the parking associated with the uses so that you have that flexibility over time as economics change, as trends in retail change, to be able to allow for those changes of uses. The other thing we've done here is exempt small businesses under 5,000 square feet from needing to meet the minimum number of parking spaces. And this is for the similar reason, in that there's a lot of older buildings here that need to be reused. And there's just not sufficient parking to make it work. So the idea here is really to try to encourage small businesses that don't have the money to invest and create new parking spaces on site, even if it's feasible to fit in. So this is trying to support those small businesses to be able to open with a low cost of entry into the marketplace. The other thing we've done is focus on design standards for these commercial ground floors. So we have a minimum ground floor height of 15 feet. This is consistent with the existing specific plan. This just creates nicer spaces, frankly, on the ground floor from an aesthetic standpoint, and also allows more flexibility of uses because some retail spaces really do need that 15-foot ground floor. There's a requirement for primary entrance treatments, a transparency requirement. This means 60% of the ground floor must be transparent openings, which are generally windows. So you can think of it as a minimum window requirement. And this just creates a more pedestrian friendly environment, that sort of traditional storefront environment, so that you can see into the uses. It makes the area more interesting and walkable. And we have restrictions against blank walls that are over a certain number of feet. So you don't end up with unattractive blank walls facing your commercial core. And we have an overall transparency requirement too, because every once in a while you'll see buildings on the upper floors not have enough windows and just create a not nice aesthetic for the street. The other thing to point out here is the Kettles Nursery site has some great architectural character. And so it's not technically a historic resource, but we wanted to celebrate the history of that site. So the specific plan has added a number of design guidelines for that site. So if the site does redevelop, it's encouraging the future developer to keep some of these design ideas in mind, so that the existing, some of the existing structures could potentially be maintained and celebrated as part of an integrated site design. So in terms of the commercial flex area, which is this area down here in this red color, this is our other commercial only zone. And it's a little different in character to the commercial core, which is this area I was just talking about here. So while this area is more of the retail sort of neighborhood services spine, this area here, as you all know, has a really eclectic group of uses right now. Some aren't compatible with adjacent residential, like the cement batching facility. Those have been sort of phased out over time. They're allowed to continue to operate, but they are not allowed to expand, and the use is no longer prohibited. So what we wanted to do here is encourage retail and neighborhood services and amenities, but also allow for a wider variety of commercial uses that could help stimulate this kind of innovation hub concept that Anita mentioned, because they're large sites, they're freeway adjacent, they could be very attractive to certain types of startup and incubator businesses. There's an example already off of Washington. There's some great startup businesses there that we met with doing really interesting things across a really wide variety of industries, from cycling to, aerospace and everything, and, everything in between. So that's the kind of great incubation type of uses that are important for Pasadena to have and support, and can be great neighbors as well. So the vision for that area is to support these kinds of eclectic uses that are good residential neighborhood or good residential neighbors. So there is a limitation on big box retail in the current specific plan. So we carried that forward. It doesn't allow single retail businesses of over 40,000 square feet. So this is slightly different. The citywide has a big box retail max of 75,000 square feet. So this is tailored to this neighborhood. 40,000 square feet is sort of a typical large grocery store. So it's allowing for a grocery store type use to go in, but not the sort of really standard Home Depot size big box that can attract a lot of vehicle trips. In terms of the height, we bumped it up a little bit, just like we did on the other side of the street, from 36 to 39 to allow for some taller commercial floors, which you sometimes see demand for in these kinds of commercial flex spaces where these incubator businesses have been. And then, actually, sorry, this is not correct. It is the 36 to 39. And then the parking is not permitted adjacent to the street. So what we mean by that is, right now you'll see in the old and some of the uses where you have the sort of strip mall style parking, where parking is allowed right at the sidewalk. We do not allow that. And we do that to create a more pedestrian friendly atmosphere and push parking away from the street. So it's more aesthetically pleasing. I didn't mention, actually, I glossed over the feedback. In terms of what we've heard about this area is the desire to stimulate redevelopment of underutilized space here and unattractive commercial land that currently exists, and also for a nicer buffer to the residential uses from the freeway with this type of commercial and light industrial employment uses that I mentioned. All right. So moving on, from a transitions perspective, we're not changing a lot. So it's really just maintaining what was already in the specific plan. So it's really focusing on protecting adjacent single family neighborhoods from adjacent scale that feels out of place. In terms of setbacks, the setback, again, the focus is relatively similar to what's in the existing specific plan. The feedback that we had gotten was to preserve and enhance the existing character of Lincoln Avenue, to maintain the street wall. And what we mean by street wall is you can, as shown in this photo, it's the sort of wall that's created that frames the street. And when you have a consistent street wall, the street and the sidewalk environment just feel more comfortable, more safe, more interesting to look at. So urban designers use the term street wall as a goal of a type of sense of place that you want to create along a corridor. And so what we've done with the setbacks is we do want to create a street wall and a sense of place, but also allow for some flexibility too, because when you get overly rigid with your setback requirements, sometimes there's unintended consequences with developers actually achieving what the community would like to see. So we are allowing for the softening of some building edges of the lot lines with landscaping, and that was something that we heard not just in Lincoln, but in other areas, that they would want to allow for that kind of landscaping while still having that street wall. And they also want more space for sidewalk dining. And so it's important in our street setback requirement shown here that the setback requirement, you're able to sort of carve out from it. So the setback requirement applies to 70% of your parcel frontage, but not 100%. And so you can carve out space for sidewalk dining, for example. That is currently in the specific plan, so that is not a change from what's in the code right now. So one thing we have done though is increase the increase the setback in the multifamily areas. So that's here and down here. Right now it's 10 feet and we're increasing it to the 15 to 20 feet shown here. And the reason why we did this is some of the older buildings, the prevailing setback tends to be in that 15 to 20 foot range. And it creates a more attractive front yard, gives it a little more of a single family kind of feel and character, and it allows for a richer, more lush landscaping in the front yard, which is very complementary to Muir High School. So for the properties here, you have this beautiful front yard with large tree canopy. So you get the more symmetrical feel here when you have a larger front yard setback on this side. But we carried that forward here in this area, which is also adjacent to some single family homes here that have similar types of setbacks in that 15 to 20 foot range. The other thing we did was slightly actually reduce some of the setback requirements south of the 210 because we wanted to have more of a street wall and make this area more walkable, and also to just stimulate development. The parcels here are what we call shallow. They're not terribly deep. And so you want to be able to allow the developer to push the development close to the street. So you get that street wall and they're still able to build new housing to meet those, housing vision that was laid out by the city and the community. So we just did some refinements there. The other thing worth mentioning is the fence requirement. We slightly increased the landscape requirement in front of fences. And one thing that came up with the community is that there's a number of fences along Lincoln that sometimes make it feel not as comfortable or aesthetically pleasing. And there's several examples that are too high relative to the existing code and sometimes are not softened with this kind of landscape buffer shown here in front of the fence. And so what we've done is we've just increased the required setback just from 1.5 to 2 feet, but that just allows that extra softening of the fences. And we've lowered the fence requirement or fence maximum height by 1/2 foot too. So in terms of the sidewalk, this was a huge focus because in terms of feedback, we got so many comments about making the space more pedestrian friendly, adding space for amenities, landscaping, the ability to enjoy outdoor dining, having a nicer tree canopy, and also just providing clear direction to property owners because sometimes when developers come in, it's confusing in terms of how wide does the sidewalk need to be in front of my property. And so we have created sidewalk minimums on the northern commercial core area of 15 feet. And that's really to maintain that, that retail neighborhood services kind of commercial core pedestrian friendly atmosphere. So you have enough space for a great tree canopy. You have enough space for parkways, which I'll get to in a minute. And you have opportunities for sidewalk dining. And so the other thing we've done is create sidewalk zones. And so we haven't just said the sidewalk needs to be 15 feet. We've also said the sidewalk needs to be 15 feet and this amount of feet. In this example shown here, it's 4 feet, but it varies in different areas through the specific plan. This amenity zone has to be 4 feet wide, and that's supporting a healthier tree canopy. A lot of the tree pits you see are sometimes 3 feet in width or even more shallow, and it's just difficult to have a tree be able to thrive and grow in a healthy way. In terms of the walk zone, that's the area that needs to be clear of obstructions. And so for the commercial core area, that would be a 7-foot walk zone. And that makes sure that the property owner is allowing that space for enough pedestrians to travel through the area. And then we have a optional frontage zone. So if the property owner wants to put extra landscaping or seating in front of their use, they can do that. So in terms of parkways and street trees, so now that we've sort of carved out the amount of space required for the sidewalks, we've also carried forward some parkway requirements. They're similar to what's currently required. We increased it just a little in one of the sub areas. And we've done this because we've gotten so much support and desire to have that tree canopy that I mentioned, and just to soften and beautify the corridor with additional greenery. The climate action plan for the city is focused on increasing stormwater capture to reduce runoff and pollution, and also to reduce the urban heat island effect. So the idea here is to use parkways and street trees to help cool the neighborhood and just cool the environment for pedestrians. And so the way we're doing this is requiring this space here, these parkways, which is these sort of green rectangular strips. They look like this. These are some examples from within Pasadena, which you see beautiful parkways in all of the residential areas, but to require them more in these commercial areas. And so depending on where you are, you'd have a 30% or a 60% parkway requirement. And so we, in one sub area, and I can't show it to you on a map, we've increased the requirement from 30 to 60%. We would also require larger tree walls to promote healthy growth than what's currently required. And we're exploring new street tree options that better complement new development, especially in the commercial core, to look at some of the existing tree selections that might not be as appropriate for the new kind of vibrant mixed use and commercial core environment for future uses. And so finally, we have open space. So as Anita mentioned, particularly after COVID, but even well before, the support for more open space requirements within new developments, we hear frequently, and just the desire to overall increase the amount of green space. To better align the open space with the number of residents, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and also just to have open space that's more usable. So if you're required to build more of it, if you have the space that you need to build more functional open space instead of what we sometimes call the leftover open spaces that provide greening, but maybe not as functional for people living in the development. So one new thing that we've been focused on for Lincoln and also in other plans is increasing the open space requirement. So right now you are required to build 150 square feet of open space for every unit. So what we propose to do is increase this number, but also have it correlate with the number of bedrooms in that unit. And that way, if you have a development that's all studios and a development that's all 3 bedrooms, right now, the number of open space or the amount of open space would be the same. If you correlate it with the number of bedrooms in a development, then you're more closely linking the amount of open space with the amount of people that would actually be living in that development. It also provides an indirect benefit of helping to tailor and refine the massing of the building. Because if a developer needs to, or an architect needs to integrate more open space into the site plan and the design of their buildings, then it's more opportunities for balconies and patios, and shown here, that just provide more architectural interest and can lead to better design overall. The other thing we've done is we're requiring large non-residential projects, and by non-residential, that really means for the most part commercial projects, to include open space, and that was not previously required. The other thing we've done is create more objective design standards for the open space design. So as shown here, every development is required to have a certain amount of private open space, which is generally balconies and patios, and a certain amount of common open space, which are generally courtyards. It can be indoor open space, it can be rooftop. In some cases, if it's a shared rooftop, pools. And so we have design standards around how to design those shared common spaces to make sure that the design quality is elevated and the space is more functional and usable. And so that's it. I'm going to hand it back to Anita to talk about next steps, and then we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Susan. Really quickly, in terms of next slide, please, Susan, in terms of next steps. So as I mentioned earlier, we are planning to hold a planning commission study session in late April, and that's where we'll be sharing with the public a complete proposed plan on the Lincoln Avenue specific plan. And so if you haven't had a chance to sign up for our monthly emails or alerts, I highly encourage you to go to our website. It's rpasadena.org. There you can sign up to get periodic updates and get the latest information on what we're doing. And so I will open it up now for Kashan, actually, for questions and answers.
There are some, thank you for the presentation, some questions in the Q&A that I think maybe your team will be able to answer. The first one is there a change in use plan for Kettles Nursery?
Do you want me to take that one, Anita? Yeah, so right now, I'm not aware of any planned development for that site. So for what we wanted to do is get ahead of the potential future use to try to encourage that celebration of the existing structure and the historic and cultural, history from the site, but I'm not aware of a proposed use as of right now.
And then I'm not sure if the question was if there's like a proposed project or if we were changing the uses that would be allowed, Susan. So maybe you.
Oh yeah. So no.
So
yeah, the proposed uses in that that area, by Wyoming and Montana, are generally the same. So you're allowed to do, your standard sort of retail, neighborhood services, sort of community and cultural kinds of commercial uses that you see in that type of environment. We have a detailed list of uses in the specific plan of what you can and can't do there. But what you can do on that site is not changing from what's currently permitted.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions about traffic flow.
so I'll generally respond to that, Kashan.
Okay,
so the question is, what changes in traffic flow or street parking are expected? And so, again, this is a plan that would take over, over a period of time. And so as new projects come through the city, they have to go through a permitting process. And so projects of a certain size would have to go through some level of review from the Department of Transportation. And so there are the departments that would analyze any potential, traffic or circulation issues from a proposed project, as well as parking. And so again, as projects come in, it's over time. So this, proposed plan doesn't anticipate to increase or have a negative impact in terms of traffic or parking. And again, as projects come in one by one through the city, the Department of Transportation analyzes those impacts and appropriately mitigates them if necessary. So hopefully that answers that question.
I think so. This is feedback that this person, Megan, is interested in maintaining North Lincoln Avenue as a safe, wholesome family environment, especially because of its proximity to the high school, and specifically limiting liquor, vape, smoke shops, and marijuana stores. I don't know if anyone would like to. Councilmember Hampton, do you want to chime in there? Or it's not actually a question, it's just a statement, which I think is consistent with the Lincoln Avenue specific plan.
Yeah, so just really quickly, we've been hearing consistently kind of limiting liquor stores in the area. The 2013 specific plan currently does, and so we're carrying that over with the new plan. We kind of need to take a little closer look in terms of vape smoke shops and marijuana stores, in terms of whether or not the current and the proposed plan would allow those uses. Particularly the marijuana stores, that's a little bit different in terms of how the city regulates, and it has a separate process. But we'll take that comment and we'll take a look at that.
I will just add in that cannabis retailers were not approved for our district. There will be no cannabis retailers unless the policy is updated and changed. And even if it was updated and changed, it would probably less likely there would be a location for a cannabis retailer. The only location that, if the policy was updated and changed, would be where the Lincoln Lumber site is now. And that's very in the gray area because it's so close to an elementary school.
I can on the liquor store front that the way it works now, that we would carry forward is we didn't want to prohibit a supermarket from coming in that might sell liquor, but it's not the primary, function. And so the way it's written is you can have a food sales business that has a certain very small percentage of the footprint can be used to sell alcohol, but you cannot have a smaller store that sells entirely liquor, or mostly liquor. And so that was our way of prohibiting liquor stores, but allowing larger grocery stores that might sell some liquor. So that's the way it's set up now.
Anita, will this presentation be uploaded to the Lincoln Avenue Specific Plan webpage on the Our Pasadena site?
Yes, we can absolutely link it up if you give me a copy of the presentation. I know it's being recorded, and so we'll post it onto the program website.
Okay, cool. And then there's a question about, it says, I understand there's a restriction on the number of churches in the specific plan area. Could you elaborate on that, please?
In terms of restrictions on a number of churches, I'm not familiar with a restriction in the Lincoln Avenue specific plan that regulates the amount of churches. And so maybe Stephen can elaborate. I don't know, Kashan, if you're aware of any restrictions in Lincoln Avenue specific plan. This is a new one to me.
I'm not aware of any.
Okay,
Councilmember
so we'll look into it in terms of if the current plan has some restrictions. I'm not aware of it, and I see Susan nodding as well. And so I'm curious to kind of understand a little bit better in terms of what the concerns are with regards to churches in Lincoln Avenue.
You know what, I can follow up with Stephen and then follow up with you. We're in communication. Councilmember Hampton, do you want to move towards,
Yeah, there were a couple more questions that I thought maybe you've gone through all of them. Oh, there was a question about the potential of adding a parking structure on Lincoln. Is that a possibility for someone who is coming in as a developer?
Yeah, I can take that. I was just possible to add parking structure or two so that the streets don't get crowded. Yeah. A developer can build a parking structure, within height limits within the area. However, I think from an economics perspective, parking structures are very expensive. And so I think it's not terribly likely to see a parking structure happen in one of the commercial only areas. I think it's possible that in the mixed use area, if residential development were to occur, that they would opt to maybe build part of the parking underground or above ground. That's sort of a structure environment that could potentially be open for public use if that kind of policy was put into place, but I wouldn't want to mislead the community to think that a parking structure in the area near Wyoming and Montana is likely to be developed just sheerly because of the cost involved relative to the small scale nature of the area, where you're not allowed to do a lot of development. I know there's several other questions. I can start to go through some of them too, if you'd like. I see.
There was actually a question that I thought was really interesting, and different viewpoint and advantage, and something that wasn't brought up in the presentation. It was the climate change question as it relates to how will this specific plan affect climate change. And I think that there are policies in place right now, maybe some of you can mention or talk about that, where commercial buildings will have to have solar. There will have to be chargers for electric cars. Anita, are you?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. And so the city adopted, I'm trying to remember when, 2018, I believe, a climate action plan. And so there's, in that document, there are certain requirements for new developments in order to essentially not emit any additional greenhouse gas emissions. There's also certain building code requirements that as new development comes in, they'll have to include energy efficient appliances and kind of insulated windows. And so, as new buildings get built, they're much more efficient. They emit less greenhouse gas emissions. The city's also just launched a program which is funded by SCAG, and we partnered with Alta, another consultant, Day One, which is a local group here in Pasadena, and the Complete Streets Coalition as well. And so we just held a workshop a couple of weeks ago on soliciting input from the community on how we can cool Pasadena streets. And one of the areas that are the focus is actually Lincoln Avenue, because early on when we were doing our research in the Lincoln Avenue specific plan area, we realized it's relatively hot in the area, and there's various factors, the lack of canopy shade trees along Lincoln, some of the buildings. So there's a couple of things that we wanted to kind of look a little bit into. And so luckily we received this grant from SCAG, and we're in the process of doing a little bit more research on Lincoln Avenue and another part near City Hall in terms of how we can prepare essentially a toolkit for the city. And so when development does occur, maybe there's ways of including solar or other shade structures that can help reduce the heat island effect. And essentially that's, when you have a lot of asphalt, a lot of concrete, it just gets even more hotter with the extreme weather that we're seeing. And so in a couple of months, we'll have the second workshop, and you can find out more information off of the Climate Action Plan. And I'll actually type in the website. I believe it's coolingpasadena.org. I'll double check and I'll put it in the chat for those that are interested in how the city is trying to address greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. And also Martin Potter, who's on our team, he's leading the efforts on the Climate Action Plan in terms of the annual report that the city does in terms of documenting the progress that we're making in terms of all the different programs that the various city departments have to implement in order to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so that report, I believe, went to the Environmental Action Advisory Committee, and then it's going to the Municipal Services Committee, which is a subcommittee of City Council shortly. And so I'll ask Martin to provide just on the chat some additional information on how to be involved in the Climate Action Plan. So, but it is a super important topic for us, not only for Lincoln, for all 8 of the specific plans. And a lot of the standards were crafted to try to address, climate change and greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, and in terms of, I'll just add on the building side, the citywide code is better able to deal with some of these requirements related to climate because the specific plans don't get updated that often, and the code can be more nimble as these, some are California state requirements come down, or these other ideas that come out of the Pasadena's efforts, they really should be applied citywide, not just in the specific plan areas. And so some of much of what Anita talked about will sit outside of the specific plan. But as much as we can incorporate into the specific plan, in particular around tree canopy, for example, we will be.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much. There's one more question that I think we can answer tonight. It is a question about, is there going to be a limit on tenant square foot space?
No, I don't know if that was referring to a minimum or
Sorry,
a
on the
maximum.
east side of Lincoln, south of the 210, to be
Oh, I see.
specific.
Okay. No, there are no limits in the specific plan in terms of the tenant size.
Perfect. And I did notice there were a couple other questions. One was related to housing for native Pasadenians. I just do want you all to know that this past Monday, we passed a pilot project to do just that. Any affordable projects that are for home ownership or for rental, to give priority to those that lived in Pasadena or have family ties to Pasadena that previously lived here for at least 5 years. So I do want to mention that because we get a lot of questions about people that have lived in Pasadena, just recently moved out of Pasadena, but still trying to move back into the city, and they were looking for a place before they left, and for unseen circumstances, they were pushed out. And so the city council on Monday just recently passed a pilot program, and that will be running for about a couple of years now. And it looks like it's going to go for at least a year. And also just wanted to let you know that there's about 9 across the city, not in just one area. There's about 970 affordable units coming online. So that's really good news for anybody looking for affordable housing in our community. Also, one of the other questions that I noticed in the update here was, let's see, maybe I got all of the questions. Oh, there was a question about, there's always been a rumor of residential development along Lincoln for years, but I haven't noticed any progress. Do you know of any news regarding developments in the pipelines? So there is going to be change at at Chan's Market. Chan's Market will be a Buddhist temple, and those plans were recently approved. It looks really nice. There was a lot of community input and also community meetings about that project. Also at Lincoln and Washington, it's called the Lincoln Bedrooms development. We will have some more meetings about that. We've actually had quite a few meetings, and there's progress there. It went from, I believe, 130 units down, and I know the neighbors were not really happy with the original proposed plan at all. And so they have gotten that project down to about 64 units the last time that I checked. And they are submitting plans, and there will be more public participation. And the developer in the planning department just recently reached out to us about having a meeting after their next planning commission meeting. So, or actually maybe they're in design commission now, design commission meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that there will be another meeting about that specific project. We've had 3 meetings about that site, and that's about 2 acres there. Once again, I want to thank Anita and her fantastic team for putting this on and having all of these community meetings so that your voice is being heard. Please do not hesitate to reach out to R Pasadena. Is it rpasadena.com, Anita?
rpasadena.org.
Sorry, rpasadena.org. Please don't hesitate to reach out, review the plan there, review this video if you would just want to review the plan all over again. Feel free to share your comments with me directly or Anita's team. I'm taking all the comments. This will be coming to council. This comes to council in 2 months, Anita?
We're aiming to go to planning commission in April.
Okay.
And so, once we get to planning commission, it just depends on them recommending something to city council.
Okay. And so we will make
hopefully
sure that
soon.
we'll make sure that you know about the planning committee meeting. If you are on our news list, that information will go out in our updates to the district, so you could also get involved in that way. Once again, my office, we're always here, willing and ready to help at any time. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Once again, my phone number is 626-744-4444. I want to thank you all for spending your Wednesday with us, and always look out for your neighbors. Remember that if you just want to just talk or concerns in your neighborhood, I'm always here for you. I love each and every one of you. God bless you and have a good night.